Hi everyone, Dr. Obeng-Frimpong here again, and welcome to the TutorMed channel, where medicine is simplified. In today's video, I want to discuss the lymphatic drainage of the body. And so first, let's see how lymph is formed in the body. Now, as many of us may be aware, the heart supplies various organs of the body through arteries, and the arteries would branch into arterioles. And so here is an arteriole, represented in red. And so after the blood has supplied, or after the artery system has supplied the organ, the blood would move out of the organ through veins. But the veins are formed by small veins called venules. And so the venules will form the veins. Just as the artery branched into arterioles, the venules would combine to form the vein. And so blood moves into the organ through the arterial system and exits the organ through the venous system. Now, in between the arteriole and the venule is the capillary bed, which is found at tissue level. Now, the capillary bed has two parts. So the part of the capillary bed, which is closer to the arteriole, is known as the arteriolar end of the capillary bed. The arteriolar end of the capillary bed. Then we have the part of the artery, so the part of the capillary bed, which is closer to the venule. That is called the venular end of the capillary bed. And as you can see, at the capillary level, we have tissues. So we have the various cells of a particular organ. So this is one also here. Then the various cells are here. Then in between the cells are actually, or is actually the tissue space or the interstitial. At the arteriolar end of the capillary bed, because it is closer to the arteriole, the hydrostatic pressure here is very high. And remember from your basic sciences lectures that the capillary is a part of the vascular system where exchange of materials occur. And so here plasma is filtered out of the capillaries into the tissue space. And so at the arteriolar end of the capillary bed, like I said, because of the high hydrostatic pressure here, fluid moves out of the capillaries. And so plasma is filtered into the tissue space to form interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. And this is necessary because the cells need to pick up some nutrients or substances, some substances from the blood. And to do that, the capillary would have to filter the plasma into the tissue space so that there can be exchange of materials between the cells and then the interstitial fluid. And so fluid seeps out of the arteriolar end. Then at the venular end, because veins usually have a low pressure system at the venular end, the fluid is reabsorbed back into the venules. It turns out that in a day, about 20 liters of plasma is filtered in a day. So it means that in 24 hours, the entire tissue fluid produced is about 20 liters. And out of these 20 liters, only about 17 liters is reabsorbed into the venular system. And so it means that every day there is an excess of 3 liters left behind. And if we don't get a system which would reabsorb that excess 3 liters back into circulation, with time, there will be tissue edema. And so that is the essence of the lymphatic system. And so here, the lymphatic system begins here as lymphatic capillaries. So that is what is represented in green. And remember that their function is to return the excess fluid which wasn't reabsorbed into the venous system, to return it back into circulation. Okay, so the lymphatic system would reabsorb the 3 liters that is left each day. Okay, and so, like I said, the lymphatic system would begin as lymph capillaries. So at the capillary level, we have blood capillaries and then lymph capillaries. Lymph capillaries. So these lymph capillaries would absorb the excess tissue fluid and then would dump them into the lymphatic vessels. Now remember that the point the blood moved out, or the plasma moved out of the capillary system into the tissue space, that was called interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. The moment the excess tissue fluid enters the lymphatic system, the name changes from interstitial fluid to lymph. And so lymph is interstitial fluid inside the lymphatic capillaries. Good. And so, like I said earlier, the lymphatic vessels would eventually, these lymphatic vessels will eventually return fluid into the circulation, and we'll see that soon. However, before they send this fluid into circulation, along their pathway, several lymphoid organs called lymph nodes, we'll see a picture of that soon, have been placed along their paths to screen the lymph before they eventually enter circulation. And so here we have a general overview of the lymphatic system. However, I must quickly point out that not all body tissues or not all body organs have the lymph vessels in their tissue spaces. Not all not all body tissues have got these green capillaries in their tissue spaces. There are some which have just the blood capillary network and there are no lymph vessels. And the mnemonic used to remember these tissues is actually CBIC. And then the source of this information is actually from Snell's Clinical Anatomy. For those of you who don't know Snell, Professor Richard Snell is a professor emeritus of anatomy and health sciences at the George Washington University. And then he's probably the longest serving president of the American Association of Clinical Anatomists. And so according to Professor Emeritus Richard Snell, these tissues I'm about to list do not have lymph capillaries. C stands for the CNS. So when you get to the brain, you get to the spinal cord tissues, get to the spinal cord, I wanted to write. There are no lymphatic vessels here. Then E stands for the eyeball. So there are no lymphatic vessels in the eyeball. Then the next E actually stands for the epidermis of the skin. Epidermis of the skin. C big, and so B stands for the bones. I stands for the internal ear. And then the C here again stands for cartilage. And so these tissues do not have lymphatic vessels in their tissue spaces. And so here, let's see a general overview of the lymphatic vessels. So as you can see here, we have these lymphatic vessels coming from the legs, as you can see here, coming from the legs, So the green vessels here are the lymphatic vessels. They are bringing fluid from the lower parts of the body. So those are the lymphatic vessels. And as you can see, along their pathways, we have these rounded light green structures, and those are the lymph nodes. And so, like I said, there's also a lymph node here. That is, or these are lymph nodes. You have lymph nodes here as well. These are all lymph nodes. So their purpose is to screen the contents of the lymph, whether there is an infection, whether there is any foreign material, screen them and filter them before they get into circulation. Okay, very good. And so please remember that generally the lymphatic vessels can be grouped into two, or can be divided into two. We have the superficial lymphatic vessels, superficial lymphatic vessels, and then the deep lymphatic vessels. And so their names kind of give them away as far as what they will do is concerned. And so superficial lymphatic vessels actually bring lymph. So they bring lymph from the superficial parts of the body. And so like the chest wall, the dermis of the skin, and so on. And then they lie in the subcutaneous tissue, superficial parts of the body. And then the deep lymphatic vessels actually bring lymph from the internal organs or the viscera. Okay, and so if you get here, for example, if you get into the chest cavity or the chest region, these will be superficial lymphatic vessels because they are bringing lymph from the hand or the palm, forearm, etc. But the lymph that is drained from the heart will be drained by deep lymphatic vessels. So that is the point. That superficial lymphatic vessels would bring lymph from the superficial parts of the body, while the deep lymphatic vessels will bring lymph from the internal organs or the deep organs of the body or the deep structures of the body. Now, as a principle, eventually all superficial lymphatic vessels will drain into the deep lymphatic vessels. That is a principle we have to take note of, that eventually all superficial lymphatic vessels will bring their lymph into the deep lymphatic vessels, which would eventually drain the entire lymph into circulation. Now, if that is understood, I want to make a statement here that generally the channels which carry lymph are organized into about 4 levels. This is what I mean. You see, when the lymphatic capillaries absorb the lymph has to move through some channels before they eventually end up in the circulation. I'm saying that those channels which carry lymph are organized into various levels, and there are about 4 levels. The first level we already know is the lymphatic vessels, and so they are found in the capillary bed. So they would bring the lymphatic capillaries. They are found in the capillary bed, so they will bring lymph first from the tissue, and then the second level is they would have to dump it into what? The lymphatic vessels. And so from the lymphatic vessels, the lymph ends up in lymphatic trunks. And just as a reminder, note that we have the superficial and then the deep lymphatic vessels. So from the lymphatic vessels, they would also dump their lymph into the trunks. And then finally, the lymph would end up in lymphatic ducts, which are the highest level of the lymphatic system, because it's the lymphatic duct that will eventually dump the lymph into circulation. And so kindly note that the 4 levels of the lymphatic system are 1, the lymphatic capillaries, which would eventually dump their lymph into the lymphatic vessels. And we have two of them, superficial and deep. The superficial will eventually dump their contents into the deep vessels, and later all these will end up in the lymphatic trunks, and finally in the lymphatic ducts. Okay. Now kindly note that we will discuss the lymph nodes and their clinical correlation in our second video. This video is just about the general organization of the lymphatic system. And so we've seen what lymphatic capillaries are, we've seen what lymphatic vessels are. And so we move to the third level, that is the lymphatic trunks. That is the lymphatic trunks. Let's see that in the next slide. Good. And so we have about 5 main, or should I say 4 main lymphatic trunks. Let me just give a general principle here that there are 5 main lymphatic trunks which are paired. It means that we have one on the right and then one on the left. Then we have another one unpaired lymphatic trunk. So generally 6 main lymphatic trunks which are paired, and then 1 main lymphatic trunk which is unpaired. So it means that this one is only found on just one side of the body, but these 5 are found on the left and then the right. And so let's look at the lymphatic trunks. Is there a mnemonic to remember them? Yes, there is a mnemonic to remember them. So the mnemonic to remember the lymphatic trunks is actually IJ bliss. IJ bliss. IJ bliss. And so the first I want to talk about is actually the intestinal lymphatic trunk. Intestinal lymphatic trunk. And the intestinal lymphatic trunk would actually bring most of the lymph from the gastrointestinal system. So as you can see, so most of the lymph from the intestines is brought or is carried by the intestinal lymphatic trunk. Then the J is also a trunk called the jugular trunk. So all the lymphatic vessels which are coming from the head and neck, from lymphatic vessels, where do you move to? Move to a trunk. And so their trunk is the jugular trunk. Then the B here stands for bronchomediastinal trunk. Bronchomediastinal trunk. I will show you pictures soon. Sorry, bronchomediastinal trunk. And then the bronchomediastinal trunk brings blood from the trachea, the bronchus, sorry here. So the trachea, the bronchus, the lungs, the heart, etc. Okay. Then the L here stands for the lumbar trunk. Again, I'll show you pictures soon. So the lumbar trunk brings blood from the lower limbs or the lower parts of the body, the lumbar trunk. Then the I here stands for intercostal trunk. So they bring the lymph, or they drain the lymphatic vessels from the medial parts of the chest wall. Then lastly, the S stands for, forgive me, let me cross down here or up here. The S stands for the subclavian trunk. So these would bring lymph from the upper limbs and then the lateral parts of the chest wall, and even the part of the abdominal wall above the umbilicus. So IJ bliss. The first I is the unpaired lymphatic trunk. Okay, and then the J bliss are the paired lymphatic trunks. And so let me tidy up my board. So I, J bliss, I for intestinal trunk, J for jugular trunk, where the neck structures would eventually drain into this trunk. Then bliss, B for bronchomediastinal trunk, L for lumbar trunk, I for intercostal trunk, and then S for subclavian trunk. And so once you are done with the trunks, then you move to the final part, which are the ducts. Okay, which are the ducts. And so before we get there, let's look at the trunk, the various trunks here in this diagram. Now, as you can see here, look at this vessel, green vessel here, and then this green vessel here as well. Okay, so they are the lumbar trunks. So they would bring lymph from the lower parts of the body, so the legs, the perineum, the pelvis, lower parts of the body. And then, although we said that the intestinal trunk is actually an unpaired trunk, in some people, they may be paired, okay? But usually it's an unpaired trunk. So this one here is the intestinal trunk. Now, the intestinal trunk and then the lumbar trunks, okay, I would return, I will come here soon again. Let me look for the other trunks. So here, the other trunks, if you watch this trunk very carefully, coming from the head, this is the jugular trunk. Then this here, which runs with the subclavian vein, okay? As you can see, this green thing here, this is the subclavian trunk. Then you have one which is coming down like this, which drains the chest cavity. So this is the the bronchodiastinal trunk I was talking about. Now, please note that this is the posterior chest wall. The intercostal trunks are actually found in the anterior chest wall, whilst these trunks, which are not main trunks, okay? Remember I said the 5 main or the 6 main. These are not main trunks. They're not considered main trunks, but they also contribute to this duct I will discuss later. So these are minor trunks called the thoracic trunks. We can have mediastinal trunks as well, but ideally they are not so considered as a main trunk, so I will leave them here. And so as you can see, let me indicate on the right too. So this is the jugular trunk, then this is the subclavian trunk, and of course we have the bronchomediastinal trunk. Okay, so these are the trunks. Now I wanted to make a point here. I wanted to say that usually the lumbar trunks and then the intestinal trunk would end and then form a dilatation here. Okay, this dilatation here is called the cisterna chyli. Cisterna chyli. And here we are going to begin the ducts. Okay, discussion of the ducts. So we are done with the trunks. So the cisterna chyli is actually the beginning of the largest lymphatic channel. Okay, the ducts, the largest duct. You have only 2 ducts. Okay, so this is called the thoracic duct, and it is the largest lymphatic duct. If you follow its course upwards, you will see that the thoracic duct eventually, as you are following, this is its course upwards. I'm going to follow it up in the root of the neck, and you see that it drains into the angle. This vessel here is the internal jugular vein. And this vessel here, like I said early on, is a subclavian vein. And so they will join to form the internal jugular vein on the left and the subclavian vein on the left. So they will join to form the left brachiocephalic trunk. So the thoracic duct would eventually drain into the angle of the left brachiocephalic trunk. So this is the point that the lymph will eventually be sent into circulation. Okay, and so that's the thoracic duct. And then there's a duct here which is formed by this duct here. You can see that a duct here also drains into the right brachiocephalic trunk. Okay, this is the right internal jugular vein. This is the right, so the right internal jugular vein. This is the right subclavian vein. Okay, so they join to form the right brachiocephalic vein. And here there's a duct that drains into the angle, just like the thoracic duct did on the left. The duct here is actually the right lymphatic duct. And so the point here really is that from the trunks, you move to the ducts, and the ducts, there are only 2. The one which will drain into the left part of the circulation, or it will drain into the left subclavian, the left brachiocephalic vein, is the thoracic duct, while the one which will drain into the right brachiocephalic vein is the right lymphatic duct. Okay, and as you can see here, let me clear my board. As you can see here, the right lymphatic duct is drained by, or is formed by, the right jugular trunk. So this is the right jugular trunk, right jugular or jugular trunk, then the right subclavian trunk, and then the right bronchodiasternal trunk. Okay, and then the thoracic duct actually begins as the cisterna chyli. It runs up and into the root of the neck. It is joined by the left jugular trunk, the left bronchomediastinal trunk, and then the left subclavian. And so do you remember what we said? We said that the right jugular trunk will bring lymph from the head and neck on the right part. And then the right subclavian trunk will bring lymph from the right upper limb and the lateral parts of the chest wall, whilst this will bring lymph from the lungs, the trachea, and so kind of the part of the organs in the chest, those which are on the right, will be drained by the right bronchomediastinal trunk. And so it makes sense to think that the right lymphatic duct will drain only some parts of the body, which is on the right, whilst the thoracic duct will drain structures mainly on the left, and then the other parts of the body. I will show a picture soon, but if you look here, you will see that the thoracic duct is joined by the various lymphatic trunks, those which are not so main, or those which are minor. So these thoracic trunks also contribute to the thoracic duct. And so based on what I said, what this means is that if you are looking for the drainage of the right lymphatic duct, remember that the right lymphatic duct, like I said, is formed by the right jugular trunk, the right subclavian trunk, and then the right bronchomediastinal trunk. So what is the drainage of the right lymphatic duct? Duct then, yes. So the right jugular trunk brings lymph from this part of the body. So it means that this part of the body would be drained by the right lymphatic duct. Then the right subclavian brings lymph from the right upper extremity, okay? And then some parts of the chest wall and even the abdominal wall. And so it means that, and the same happens on the at the back, okay? So if you are to give you the drainage at the back, this is what would happen. Okay, so it means that this part will be drained by the right lymphatic ducts. Okay, because remember that the right lymphatic duct is formed by the right subclavian trunk, the right jugular trunk, and then the right bronchomediastinal trunk. So see, this is the distribution of the lymph drainage by the right lymphatic system. And I trust this makes sense because you know what forms the right lymphatic duct. Okay, whilst the left lymphatic duct, the thoracic duct, as it should be properly termed, the thoracic duct is formed by the two lumbar ducts, and they drain structures from where the lower limb, and so it means that this whole part will be drained by the thoracic duct because the lumbar trunk is bringing, or the lumbar trunk forms part of the thoracic duct and the intestine. So this whole part is being drained by the thoracic duct. Why is this part being drained by the thoracic duct? It is because the left bronchomediastinal trunk also drains into the thoracic duct, like you saw. Then this part will also be drained by the thoracic duct. Why? Because the left subclavian trunk was also draining into the thoracic duct. And this part of the body, okay, this part of the body, yes. So this part of the body is also drained by the left jugular trunk, which eventually drained into the thoracic duct. So it means that the thoracic duct actually drains a chunk of the body. So this part of the body will be drained by the right lymphatic duct, or a chunk of the body. So if you come to the left, so if you come to the back, the same thing. All these parts are drained by the thoracic duct. Why? Because of what? The lumbar trunk. Remember that with the intestinal trunk, they form a dilatation called the cisterna chyli, and that is the beginning of the thoracic duct. This is the left upper extremity. Why is it part of the thoracic duct drainage? It is because the left subclavian also what? The left subclavian duct, the trunk drains into the thoracic duct at the root of the neck. So this whole part, and then this part of the body, okay, on the left, the head here. Why? Because the left jugular trunk drains into this part. You see, so it means that apart from this, also part of the lower part. So apart from this side, which is drained by the right lymphatic duct, the whole of this is drained by the thoracic duct. And so, guys, this is the general overview. I wanted us to note that first, we have lymph capillaries scattered in various parts of the body, and their function is to reabsorb the excess fluid which was filtered but couldn't go back into the venous circulation. The lymph capillaries are there to reabsorb them back into circulation. And then remember that we have the CBIC. So these guys do not have lymph capillaries. From the lymph capillaries, the lymph moves into the lymphatic vessels, and we have what? The superficial lymphatic vessels and then the deep lymphatic vessels. The superficial lymphatic vessels would eventually drain into the deep lymphatic vessels. And very importantly, please note that along the path or the pathways of the various lymphatic vessels, we have lymphoid organs called lymph nodes placed along their paths, which are supposed to be screening the contents of the lymph carried by these vessels. Then the lymphatic vessels will eventually drain into the lymphatic trunks. Okay, so lymphatic vessels of the head and neck will drain into the jugular trunk. The lymphatic vessels of the thoracic cavity, the heart, the trachea, the bronchus, the lungs will drain into the bronchomediastinal. Lymphatic vessels of the upper limb, and then some parts of the chest wall, and even the torso above the umbilicus will drain into the subclavian trunk. Then the lymph from the gastrointestinal system will drain into the intestinal trunk, which is usually unpaired, and then the lower limbs, and then the pelvis perineum would be drained by the lumbar trunks. And so from the lumbar trunks, from the lymphatic trunks, they end in ducts, and there are two of them, the right lymphatic duct and then the thoracic duct. And remember that between the two, the thoracic duct is the largest and it drains the most part of the body. Yes, and so thank you for watching this video. In our next video, we'll see the clinical correlation of the lymph nodes. If this lymph node is enlarged, where is the problem coming from? Which lymph nodes drain which part of the body? So kindly like the video if you loved it, share it to any friend who might need it, and consider subscribing to our channel. And so see you in our next video, and until then, have a good day.